Thanks for joining us. My name is Lindsay Silverberg, and I'm a victim advocate at the Network for Victim Recovery of DC. Here at NVRDC, we help run the 24-hour crisis response program for sexual assault survivors seeking a medical forensic exam. We also have a hardworking team of attorneys that fight tirelessly on behalf of survivors of crime in both civil and criminal cases. Today, in honor of Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we'll be joined by some of our staff attorneys to talk about the on-campus process for sexual assault survivors interested in Title IX and what we've done to help those survivors. How do you, the NVRDC attorneys, help student survivors of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking?
So what people often don't realize is that student survivors actually not only have on-campus proceedings and adjudicatory process that they can avail themselves of, but they also have off-campus resources available and other avenues of relief. So, for example, not only are NVRDC attorneys able to assist with on-campus proceedings, on-campus accommodation requests for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, but we can also assist them with the off-campus avenues. So, for example, in obtaining a civil protective order or providing a survivor with assistance during a criminal proceeding. So, representing them with their crime victims' rights issues that may come up during the process, helping them understand the process, and being able to meet their needs.
Why is having a lawyer helpful?
Well, having a lawyer is helpful for kind of two different kinds of reasons. One is that, it's helpful for a survivor to have someone on their side watching to make sure that their rights aren't violated, to make sure that the opposing party isn't manipulating the system in some way, and having someone who knows the law around these proceedings looking out for their interests. But in another more intangible way, we see a lot in these cases that the opposing parties, the abusers, the assailants, they have hired attorneys. And that makes it so much more intimidating for a survivor to confront them, to know that they're walking to a hearing of some kind where the opposing party who's already abused and manipulated them has a lawyer of his own or her own. And so having a lawyer of your own as a survivor, it's very empowering to have your own legal advocate. And not only is it a legal advocate that someone's paid for, but it's someone who says, this is how I've dedicated my career to, and I believe you. And it's very affirming for a survivor to have that advocacy as well as the legal services that we're able to provide.
What procedures are schools required to have in place under Title IX and Clery?
Well, Title IX and Clery both place restrictions and limitations on the schools in terms of what kind of grievance procedures they can enact to solve these kind of problems in schools. So the real terminology that you want to remember is equitable and prompt. The grievance procedure that they develop has to be equitable and prompt. And while those words sound vague, basically they stand for your sort of root due process. The process has to be fair to both sides, which means both sides have to have access to information, to receive that information, to get that information, and to both use that information in the proceeding that follows after in a way that is fair. And to make that fair, the schools may impose a process where both sides will put forward statements, call witnesses, ask questions, and they basically the sides have to reflect each other so nobody has an in-house advantage. In terms of prompt, what that means is that the school is going to say this particular hearing has to take place in a certain amount of days from when the report was made, and then really when the report is made, there will be certain time frames that have to be met, and the school will really be responsible for making sure that it moves along in a prompt process.
What accommodations can a survivor receive on campus without reporting a sexual assault?
In a lot of ways, the sky's the limit. The accommodations that a survivor can receive can be very creative. So it can be something as simple as assisting a survivor in having their class schedule changed, or having particular dining hours in place for them to be able to comfortably go. Sometimes it can be as simple as providing them with an alternative entrance into a building, changing their dorm, adjusting which professors they might have classes with. So it can be something as typical as extended time for exams. So it's really what a survivor feels like they need to give themselves a greater sense of security through the process and return them to a secure place on campus.
So what have you all done to help clients in DC?
I think probably the way that I've been the most helpful in the cases that I've been involved with is really at the investigative stage. So what I'm talking about is where a student has reported that a sexual assault has occurred. The university has done an investigation where they've accumulated information, made a report, and given that report to both sides, and set a hearing date. So once that happens, essentially the student is in charge with going to this hearing date, armed with the information that the school has given her, and essentially has to prosecute her own case. That's an incredibly difficult task, I think, for somebody who is well versed in these matters, but for a student survivor who almost certainly is not, it can be scary and overwhelming. So I think that from my viewpoint, where we've been the most effective is helping student survivors through that process, helping go through the information that the school provides, finding more information, categorizing it, and really sort of planning out and practicing and going through what the hearing is going to look like, what kind of questions to ask, and sort of the mindset of what going through the grievance process looks like.
Do you have any other examples of how you've helped survivors in DC?
Absolutely. I think that Matt's right in that a lot of the times our support through the hearing process is really important. We've also done some substantial advocacy before that hearing process even takes place. We had a case where a school was refusing to move forward with a hearing after a very brief and honestly inadequate investigation into the case, stating that there wasn't enough evidence to move forward with the hearing. And so we made arguments to the school that they needed to go forward with the hearing, and through that advocacy, the client was able to get the hearing that she wanted.
Now it's time for our lightning round to see what our staff attorneys really know. Does Title IX protect survivors of all kinds of gender-based violence, including dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking?
Yes, Title IX protects all different kinds of survivors of gender-based violence.
Great. What about Clery and Campus Save? Do they apply to survivors of stalking or dating violence as well as sexual assault?
They do. Both acts apply to survivors, whether it's dating violence, regular DV, stalking, or sexual assault.
Did Campus Save change Clery and Title IX?
No, Campus Save, that's a common misconception that Campus Save might have changed Title IX in some way, but in reality what it did was codify, make into law some of the restrictions of Title IX that were before now only administrative sub-regulatory guidance.
Can a lawyer participate in on-campus hearings?
No?
Well, it depends, doesn't it?
Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of participate is. And maybe participate's a strong word. Anyone who's involved in a Title IX grievance procedure is allowed to have an advisor there with them. So whether that advisor is an attorney or somebody else, that person's allowed to accompany them. Now, once they're there, what they're allowed to actually do in the hearing differs from school to school. So sometimes it may be passing notes or giving them some small bits of guidance as we go, and sometimes the attorney or advisor may just have to sit there silently and observe.
Do schools have to report assaults to the local police?
Definitely not. In fact, in most jurisdictions, that's illegal, because under the Jane Doe laws, you should be allowed at your school to tell them about your sexual assault without them being able to report it to the police. Now, we've heard through the grapevine that there are some states that allow that, but in most jurisdictions, it is completely barred.
Can a survivor report an assault without naming his or her assailant?
The answer is yes. A survivor can definitely report an assault, especially if they're trying to get other accommodations on campus and have other issues addressed. They can still report an assault without naming the assailant.
And final question. can she report if the assailant doesn't go to the survivor's school?
She can. Even though she doesn't go to the same place as that the assailant does, the university still has the same obligations under Title IX to respond to any complaints of sexual assault, and will take it much in the same way.
Thanks so much for joining us today.